Duane Gibson. I met Dwayne when I worked for USDA. I met Dwayne, and I had to ask him how many years has it been, but it's been about 7 years ago. And I worked with Dwayne in a grant for his hoop houses. But long before that time, he was already in blueberries and I guess what, raspberries, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. You know, it's just blowed my mind actually to go out there and see everything that he was involved with and that he was growing. He's got a niche market over in Asheville, North Carolina, where he sells a lot of his produce. But Dwayne's a wonderful guy and is very, very knowledgeable about vegetables, fruits, berries, nuts, grains, a little bit of everything. So you are very, very fortunate, and we're fortunate to have Dwayne this afternoon to speak with us. So I guess at this time, Dwayne, if you'll come forward, and we'll let you go ahead with your presentation.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Let's see here. I got a fancy pointer, so occasionally I might use that. And well, my name's Duane Gibson. I was born in Augusta, Georgia, but I've lived here since I was 3 years old. So not necessarily a native, but I'm from around here. I live out in South Greene. When I was 16 years old, as a homeschool project, my grandpa propagated blueberries in North Georgia. He was one of the first nurserymen to sell rabbit-eye blueberries and get the blueberry industry going in Georgia. And so I've been saving up all my egg money from just running a farm, just my parents' horse farm and whatnot, and planted an acre of blueberries. We went down to South Georgia, picked up some rabbit eyes, and just drilled up some land and put some berries out. That was a project that I hung on to for a couple of years, then went off to college, came back, and eventually settled back on the farm about 7-8 years ago, and that's when I ran into Mike, and I had learned about high tunnel grants, and I'd been researching about doing bramble production and being able to grow those in tunnels. Come to find out, it's probably not the best way to do in Tennessee. At least to use a tunnel, you probably can make more money growing veggies and other things, flipping that tunnel a little bit more. But so that's a little bit of my background. I'll share a little bit more towards the mid part of my talk. But what I want to talk about today are about 5 different things. I'm a certified organic farm. I'm also recently became a certified organic crop inspector. I believe in the principles of organic production, and they align with regenerative ag. Just as Mike was saying, this has been around regenerative ag's been around forever. I mean, the Native Americans around us most likely planted American chestnuts on contour in the mountains. It's hard to say, they're all gone these days, but when we look at roots, they'd seem to be purposely planted. Who knows if that's true or not? None of us are around to know that. But regenerative ag is just doing natural farming. And I'm wanting to promote organic farming today because a lot of us out there are spraying grazon on our land, and that's a systemic herbicide that we need to cease that practice like yesterday. It ruins even conventional ag crops. So I'm going to emphasize a little bit about what organic is, how to become organic, what are the other alternatives under an organic window, and then on organic umbrella, and then different markets. I mean, we all want to grow something. We like to be able to sell it and make a living at what we do. So there's a myriad of ways to do that today. We're up against a lot of people that have a lot of money and that own thousands of acres of ranches in the Midwest, or thousands of acres of produce, and they have lobbyists in DC. And I don't know, is anybody a billionaire in this room? If so, I have a couple ideas I want to run by you. So we're up against a large consortium of anyways, I'm not going to get into the philosophy. Taylor back there is going to loop me in when I start to ramble about philosophy. And then how do we apply the principles? How do we get going? I was fortunate enough to be on family land, but I didn't have like $100,000 to go out and buy all the equipment and plant 50 acres of berries. So I've figured out how to do things on a small scale, run around, find old equipment that's still working in good shape. And then we'll look at some of the ways that I've been practicing regenerative agriculture techniques with my blueberry crop, some hemp that I've been growing over the last couple of years, and then a new project that now that I have some equipment, I'm starting to get into heirloom wheat. My girlfriend works at a mill, 2 mills over in North Carolina that do stone ground grain. In Greene County, we used to have like a dozen different grist mills, and they're all pretty much run down or gone these days. So bringing back grain to our local economy, staple crops, and it's not a high value item. You're not going to buy your farm off of growing wheat, but we're able to sequester carbon, increase with heirloom wheats, not your standard hybridized wheats, and a whole myriad of other things. And it leads into our supply chain issues. The world's kind of chaotic right now. So jumping into it, FIOMA, or the International Federation of Organic Agriculture, has 4 principles. IFOAM is the international body that sets standards for organic agriculture. And then nation states like the US government or the Canadian government will then form their own certifying bodies governed by their Department of Ags. So one of the principles is a principle of health. Organic agriculture, I forgot to change this one. That was something I was supposed to do. We're going to drop down to ecology while I pull up the first one. I went over this last night and then forgot to do that. The first principle is health, and it has to do with organic agriculture should sustain and enhance the health of soil, plants, animal, human, the planet as one and indivisible. And now that's a broad idea, but the gist of it is that by being our organic agriculture, we should be able to not only enhance the community around us, the planet that we're working on, the ground that we're working on, but that it should be a complete cycle. So it's looking at a holistic approach to agriculture. And then we have the principle of ecology. Organic agriculture should be based on living ecology systems and cycles, work with them, illuminate them, and help sustain them. So I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, and when on Saturdays we go out in nature and take a hike up to Marguerite Falls or go over to the Smokies, and my dad would always ask us, what are some nature lessons or object lessons that you learned today? And so applying the principles that we live, and nature around us is a sustainable system. We as humans come in there, strip off the trees, plant some corn or tobacco, and then have to start feeding it nutrition. So how do we model after what's naturally happening around us? That's one of the principles of organic agriculture. And then there's a principle of fairness. Organic agriculture should build on relationships that ensure fairness with regard to the common environment and life opportunities. So not only should we care about the environment around us, but we should care about our personal relationships, with the relationship with the farmer, relationship with our customers, relationship with other business owners. And then we have the principles of care. Organic agriculture should be managed in a precautionary, responsible manner to protect the health and well-being of current and future generations in the environment. Right now, on conventional ag, we're on a pretty stout roller coaster of polluting the Gulf with runoff of nitrogen that goes into the Mississippi, and we're not at all caring about what's going to happen in 100 years from now. Maybe we can continue agriculture the way we have for the last 100, 150 years, really 75 since nitrogen we grabbed nitrogen out of the air. Maybe it is sustainable. It's who's to say for us, but currently it looks like we might not be. So organic agriculture takes that into consideration. And then just to reiterate what the U.S. Regenerative Agriculture Alliance stands for, and that is minimize soil disturbance, maintain living soil roots, keep the soil covered, animal integration, and plant diversity. Not all of these principles are underneath the USDA Organic, and I think these are some core principles that we should add to your practice as a farmer. Or it could be that you're just a homesteader. You're still working the land. and caring for it. So USDA Organic. The USDA Organic standards are laid out in an organic system plan. There's certain standards of what you're allowed to put on your field, what crops you're allowed to grow. We're not allowed to grow any treated crops, treated seeds, crops with treated seeds. So fusarium or any other thing that you might put on a watermelon seed, you're not allowed to plant that. It's only untreated seeds. With USDA production, you're not allowed to use any synthetic inputs. You're allowed to use manure. And there's different nuances to what the organic standards and how you move forward. But if you're a regenerative farmer, you're pretty much already in alignment with most of those principles. And I'm going to get to the reason why I think we all need to be organic. But there's the other alternatives, because the USDA has some holes, like for example with cattle and other animals like chickens. You're still allowed to have a USDA organic license, and you can have containment. So you can graze your cattle out in a field for X amount of months and then bring them back into a feedlot, fatten them up, and sell them. That's perfectly fine as long as you're feeding them certified organic or non-GMO corn or any other grain. So there's been an alternative approach. And then another big one with the USDA Organic is you're allowed in that, under the USDA Organic guidelines, to do hydroponic production. Some folks disagree that just feeding liquid food throughout a system has an advantage over a soil farmer. That's up to debate. The USDA is a government-run organization, so consequently it's a slow and bureaucracy to get any change or any reform pushed through takes a long time. It takes basically every farm bill, so you're looking at every 4 years before something even happens, and then it's considered to happen, and then it might not happen for another 4 years, so it's a long program. And all that the USDA did in the 90s was trademark the word organic. So a lot of people are upset that they took the name organic and own that name now. So we have the Real Organic Project. These are a bunch of folks, Joe, from all the way from Joe's, there's a Paulin, he wrote a book about the omnivore's dilemma, which, No, Joe Salatin's not involved with these guys. Michael Paulin, thank you. And then there's Gore's involved with this, a lot of NGOs. And people are trying to get back to what they feel organic really means, which is the plant needs to be touching, the root needs to have the chance to get it to bedrock. No containment agriculture, no containment farming for livestock. There needs to, and then no container crops. I applied to be doing this, but I grow ginger in a raised bed, so they wouldn't allow me to be in the program. And then I also did something else that I fell outside the parameters of being with them. So even the way I'm practicing organic agriculture doesn't fall under the lines of what they mean by real organic. So they're opening to have an additional label. And now this whole idea of what labels are, you're probably asking the question, why do I need a label? I'm already doing what's good. It's back to access to market, and we'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to slaughter this word, but Demeter is certified organic biodynamic farming. Biodynamic farming's been around since the early 19th century. That has to do, biodynamic farming is about using preps, being in alignment with the planting under astrological planting dates, and being in alignment when you plant seeds. You're going to do it on a certain time of the, you're going to plant a certain root crop under a certain sign of a moon, and you're going to spray preps on a certain day or fertilizer on a certain day of the month, all in alignment with the moon cycles. These guys feel that they're living, and it's also back to a full plant. They also have animals incorporated on their farm. They're using preps to pack manure up into a horn of a steer twice a year on the solstice, the winter and summer solstice, the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And then they pull that prep out 6 months later. They'll spin that up in a bucket and they'll apply that out on their fields. That for them is promoting silica and increasing the, it's kind of like taking a probiotic or a vitamin. It's kind of giving it a boost, and that's their philosophy about how to approach agriculture. And then we have certified naturally grown, which appeals to the small guy, probably like me. I really didn't need to be certified organic. I'll tell you why in a second, why I became. But certified organic, naturally grown, gives you the opportunity at a tailgate market to show with like a $200, maybe $400 yearly fee. It's a peer-to-peer organic program, so that you can show your customers that you are following organic principles without having to go through all the red tape in the 6-month time frame to become organic. So I'm going to jump back to these guys. So markets. So the reason why I became USDA Organic was I was taking I came back to the farm and I had a bunch of blueberries coming in. I went out to the co-op over in Asheville, and no one would talk to me. They wanted to buy my blueberries for $16 a gallon back in 2013. And then I was talking to a buddy of mine in Eastern Carolina. He's like, Dwayne, I'm getting $25 a gallon because I'm organic. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So I went about the path of becoming organic, and lo and behold, all the co-ops and Whole Foods and different folks like them were willing to actually allow a young guy that's in his late 20s to approach them and actually have a conversation. So that's the advantage of being organic, is we've got this shiny object in our right hand that is showing that that's something that they need, that's desirable. Then if you wanted to sell your other agriculture products like squash and spinach or whatever else you might be to Whole Foods, you've already now have a conversation with that produce manager. Before, he was just going to ignore you, kick you to the road. You didn't have the volume for sales to do anything. So he didn't even want to talk to you to begin with. But now that you're organic, he needs that crop. So he's willing to speak to you. He's willing to give you whatever the USDA organic rate is at the time, which was $10 more a gallon. Now it's about $30 to $35 a gallon as an organic guy. And conventional, I actually honestly haven't seen a conventional price of what's happening at the Western Carolina market these days, but I imagine it's still around $16 to $18 a gallon. So we're out here growing, either it might be some beef or some pork. We might be growing vegetables or blueberries. We might be growing wheat. So what are the ways that we get it to market? And I'm going to go back a few slides to show you what some boys up in New York and Virginia are doing to do that. But what I wanted to share with you guys this afternoon is that there's a power in us all working together. I've been encouraging folks around me to plant blueberry acres because I can't go to Ingles and they won't buy my berries right now, or even Whole Foods, because I only have 2 acres of berries and I barely produce 1/4 of a pallet of blueberries a week. I sell most of mine wholesale to either regional co-ops or direct to market at a tailgate market in Asheville. So if more of us join together, we can start to compete against the Eastern Carolina markets that are a big packer and pulling stuff together. And we could, so 2 of those different ways of doing that is direct to consumer. There's a Mother Earth Foods over in Asheville as a delivery service. With the pandemic, they went from like a small CSA delivery service where they bought from regional vegetable farmers to a booming like 500,000. I forget the numbers now. They have a lot of customers. So you can sell your produce to them at a pretty decent wholesale price, and then they'll deliver it door to door to customers around Asheville. They also sell value-added products like kombucha. So if you have a value-added product, they'll carry that as well. You can also come up with your own delivery system. There's a bunch of different ways of being able to do that these days. Don't go out there and buy barntodoor.com. They charge you like $200 a month, and you can pretty much set your own thing up with Square. And then you can also, having your own delivery system. If you all, let's just say there's 5 of us in here that are growing blueberries, we can line up a group of, hire a delivery person, have a route between here and Johnson City, and then lo and behold, we just drop off our weekly share of blueberries and then tack on. Maybe there's other farmers around us that want to tack things on. And then there's local tailgate markets. The local tailgate market here in Greenville is seeing much better days. When I first started selling blueberries at 16, it was a thriving market. When it was downtown, people I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning. If someone was already there, the customers were there at 6 o'clock. For some reason, we've divided ourselves here. But I think there's oodles of new folks that are moving in from New York and the greater New York area, and they're used to having tailgate markets. So I think there's an opportunity for Greene County and Johnson City to see a revitalization of tailgate markets here. Also, if you want to take your produce down to Knoxville, Market Square is still a vibrant market, and I'm not sure the competition these days with getting in there. Last I heard, it was getting stout for different, if you're more of just a veggie guy or a beef guy. Then there's cooperatives. What I mean by cooperatives is what I already kind of talked about, where we can join together as a farm group, not necessarily open up the new ocean spray like with cranberries, but basically just join together with our buying power and sell that to Whole Foods. And then we can also sell to different cooperative fronts, like over in Asheville, there's a co-op, there's a co-op in Hendersonville, and there's also a co-op down in Knoxville, Three Rivers Market. And then back to what I've already been kind of like really trying to drill in is regional grocery stores. We're being divided out so much and whittled and dimed that if you wanted to take your steer down to, or your calf down to the Greenville or Greenville auction house there, you're going to get whatever the boys are willing to buy it for. I hear recently that you can take it down to Knoxville and make another $200 more a cow. I don't know, I'm not a cattle guy, but I'm just saying that we need to start. I'm just trying to plant some seeds of ideas so you guys can start thinking. There's at least a third of us in this room that are still under 35, I would assume. Most of them are on the left side, and even the folks that are over 35 or under 30, we need to come up with new ways to be able to get our produce to market. The meat packers and all these other folks have us with our hands out asking us what to pay. And we can get direct to the customer these days in more ways than we can imagine. So here's some boys that are doing it. So Mark Kimball, he's up in New York. I follow a few folks on Instagram, so apologies for if you're, anyways. But this guy has 500,000 acre farm somewhere out in New York. He sells to New York City, has one of the most expensive CSAs I've ever seen in my life. It's like $3,000 a year, or for like a summer. Extremely expensive. If you're right in his neighborhood, it's only like $800, $900. But with that, he's a working dairy farm. He's a beef farm. He's practicing regenerative agriculture. You can kind of see his tool there on the left that he just bought. He's been farming for 15 years. He didn't do this at the first day of his life. This is a speed tiller, which just is a one pass. Incorporates hills, incorporates everything right in one pass. Finds it out, comes back in, and that's where he's sown out. It looks like some corn or some winter. This was in April that he took that picture. But the one thing I want to share that what he's doing up there is that he encourages everybody. So he came back after his dad passed away this last winter, and he said, I've returned home more radicalized to actively change the dominant paradigm. And I think my first reaction is to ask for help. Can you help? I invite you and every urban and suburban rural human being to be actively participate and engage with this planet to meet our needs and the needs of our community. The needs of communities and the needs of communities in need. In other words, start farming, start grazing, start logging, start everything it takes to bring people in close contact with soil, plants, animals, and human life. If we leave it up to agribusinesses, we'll drink oat milk and nut milk and live at the mercy of the rich. Turn off your screen, put on your big snow pants, and farm until you drop. And that's the truth. The truth is that we need to be back out in the ground, working the ground. Not necessarily in a way that's going to be detrimental and going to leave it bare for our kids and our grandkids not to be able to work it. But we need to be grounded in the world around us. So much of us these days, and myself included, are strung onto our TV and our phone. Now, there's a benefit to that. You have an active audience that's willing to possibly buy your produce and your goods by looking at your phone. So you have a newer way to reach them directly than we did even just 10 years ago. But the core principle, I think, of regenerative agriculture is walking your farm every day, being out in the ground and trying to find the best way to get after it. And that doesn't mean you do it all right the first day. And I'm going to show you multiple ways here at the end of my talk of how I've been failing and how I'm not practicing all the principles. And I don't think it's a matter of doing, not necessarily trying to live up to lofty expectations. So then there's this other guy, Sylvan Aqua Farms. He's in Virginia. He's a Native American and really fascinating guy, extremely progressive, like to the point that he wants to abolish the small family farm. He wants to abolish the way agriculture's been and bring it back to the way his forefathers used to farm everything, which wasn't really farm, but to tend and maintain property. They still planted corn and all these different things, but extremely progressive guy. But one of the examples of how he's doing it, and he's the one that has given me the example currently. Right now, he's got a delivery program that he goes to with those major cities. Now, he's in one of the richest areas of Eastern America to do this. He's in Washington, D.C. The people in Washington, D.C. at tailgate markets have been making $5 to $10 grand since tailgate really took off about 10, 15 years ago. So he's at one of the best markets. They wouldn't let him into that market because he was a native guy. And they didn't want some new upcomer that was less than 30 to come and take over and take away their market share. And so he came up with new ways to get after it, which was find his customer, deliver what they wanted in a timely manner. And so here he is with some of his pigs, and he's all doing this on rented land. He's got a 1,000-acre farm that someone's rented to him, and he's not doing any of this with any land that he owns. And he fell on his face this year. He started a community project where he brought in a bunch of a whole crew of kids, and they didn't want to work. And he was surprise, surprise. But he was also the leader that didn't get in the trenches with him. He thought his lofty ideas and his lofty dreams would all it was going to take, and if he could just teach them 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. So he wasn't the best manager. So it was a combo of things. But he's learned from that a little bit. I don't know how much. He's still basically a philosophy guy on Facebook or Instagram that's just preaching these highfalutin ideas. But here we are with his pigs. He over in the far left corner behind that oak tree or whatever tree that is, that's where his pigs were earlier. Completely ate all that down. This was taken about 2 weeks ago before the snow. All this grass was above the pigs. And then, so he just rotates them probably around this little woodland area and really successfully keeps his feed costs down. He does the same thing with chickens. He does the Joe Salatin method. Joe Salatin kicked him out of his program. He's a really radical guy. And he has a lot to say about Joe. But not to get mired in all the politics of stuff, here's a guy that's getting after it. And so back to becoming certified organic. I just want to let you know that it is not hard to do that. It's not a mystery to become organic. All you need is land. You need to have land that's not been sprayed or put any synthetic amendments on it. No unapproved crops. You can't have grown some genetically modified soybeans. You couldn't even grown conventional corn that had some sort of synthetic fertilizer. But and there's plenty of land in Greene County and around here that, though it is getting eaten up faster. A lot of boys have been spraying graze on in the last couple of years. So you need a land affidavit history. If you don't own the land, you need to talk to the previous farmer, see what's been applied there for the last 3 years. And if nothing's been done, you guys sign an affidavit. No soil test is done, nothing like that. And off you go, and that spring you can start planting and selling produce. If you want to learn more about how to make an organic system plan, I'm happy to show you guys how to do that. You're basically walking through every single little thing that goes on your farm. You need to anticipate what you think you're going to need. Basically just taking all the things that you're already doing and documenting it. So that's the reason why a lot of people hate it, because you're just documenting pretty much everything you do. But we have a fancy phone and technology to be able to do that, so it kind of helps keep things streamlined. It's a lot easier than doing it 20 years ago. And then there we go. So I've kind of gone into a few of these things with application of principles, but the gist of it is just start. Figure out what you want to do. What do you want to bring to the land? What do you think your community needs? Some of the ways I did that was going out and getting a grant and realizing that high tunnel raspberry production wasn't the way to go. It wasn't producing the yields. I also planted some figs in those tunnels. The yields aren't where they need to be, but I was able to show that fig production can happen in probably a caterpillar style production. And that is a crop that is in great demand. Now you're not going to be able to sell a ton of it. Well, you might be able to sell a ton of it if you can grow it. So figure out what you want to do and what you want to bring to market, and then go around and see what the market might need, and if you might need to collaborate with some other folks. And then you don't have to own land to do it. There's plenty of people around here that don't want to see somebody from New York or from Delaware come down here and buy a 100-acre farm for, what is it now, $8,000 to $10,000 an acre? It's gone up tremendously in the last 3 years. But he's willing to let you come out there and farm on his land because he would rather see it being grown. And you could do that with veggies, you could do that with chickens, you could do that with ranching. I went to a course that Mike pointed me to about a couple years ago. Greg Judy, he's out there in the Midwest of Missouri. He didn't have any kids, so that probably helped him a little bit with this idea, but he did his book is called No Risk Ranching. He basically took land immediately around his core farm and just started leasing or grazing other people's cattle on leased land, and just being able to add weight to it. He got a little money for the weight gain. The farmer got the cattle grazed, kept disease down, and all the cool things that Mike preaches about and applies here in Greene County. And then tools. I didn't have anything. You'll see my first picture here in a second when I planted the blueberry patch that I had lost the family barn and everything due to a tornado that came through about 10 years ago. So I had a little bit of equipment, and I started using what I could. But over time, I've been able to make some good, wise investments, get some grant money, and slowly build out different things. If you follow the regenerative ag guys, they're hardcore. They don't believe in any cultivation, which is possible. I'm going to start applying some of those things with the wheat project and possibly some grit corn that I'm going to grow. And we'll see, ask me in 2 years if I've been successful to reduce fertilizer and all those good things. But just if you want to jot those down, the speed tiller is a fun toy that reduces your impact on the ground. Seed drills, there's one in the corner mostly for grass. The co-op rents went out for $75 a day, or $75 for 10 acres or less. And then it's like $2 or $5 above that. And then you could find old equipment. I went out and found some old Chalmers combines, which are slow as molasses, but I can grow buckwheat, I can grow beans, and all different types of storage crops. And it's a really inexpensive way. Boys are giving away. There was a guy out on Thompson Branch, and if you guys have questions, I'm going to cut off here in about 10 minutes. We'll just ask some questions. But the Thompson farm literally sent one to the scrapyard just about 2 months ago. I missed it. I drove by. I was going hiking. So there's old equipment in the barns, and everybody right now, all these boys are giving it away, except if you find them at auction, and then the boys from New York are buying it for above asking price. So Gibson Berry Farm. What I've been doing out at my farm, we're going to look at my blueberry production that I've done, some hemp that I've been growing, and some wheat, specifically heirloom wheat. So here's my blueberry patch that I planted about 7 years ago. You can see in the corner my barn is gone, so I came back to the farm, and I knew blueberries was a success, that no one was really doing it, and that the market was really needing that product, and they still do. There's an insatiable need for blueberries. So what I did here is I looked into the way the Koreans are farming blueberries. And the Koreans farm mostly on hillside, and they have some of the most successful low-input berries. And so what I did is I subsoiled my ground. So above that, subsoiled above, below, and in the middle of each of those rows. And then put down, not a large shank, I couldn't afford to put down. I had to do this 3 times. I had to come down, because I just had a single shank that maybe got it down to 8, maybe a foot. And that broke up the compaction. I'm working on old tobacco land here that's been that now, as you'll see in my soil amendments that I'm going to show you, have horrible high aluminum levels. So I've been battling that, and I have a lot of chlorine in my ground. So I hilled up a hill for about 3 feet, or about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and then I stuffed the blueberry in the ground, and I mulched it. And then I planted some oats in the middle of these, middle of each of my rows, and I cultivated that and tilled that for the next 3 seasons. And every spring, I cut down that oat crop and just put it over on top of my between my berries or around the berries to help with mulch or help with weed pressure. And then I also put down burlap sacks. Never put down row fabric on blueberries. I did that on my original crop, and it's still in the ground. And I have compaction issues. My roots don't want to sprout up and really start to reinvigorate the ground. And so burlap will decay, and it's completely gone. And now my blueberries are coming in really well, and I planted them densely. I planted double that I should. At the time, I still knew the guy. He's retired now, but I was able to get blueberry plants for $1.50. Now they're about $3. So I could afford to put out double the amount per acre. Now, and that's not necessarily a problem because I wanted to get berries in quickly. It's backfired on me. We had frost the last 2 seasons when I should have had a bumper crop of berries. I don't have any berries. So that idea blew up in my face, but at least I went after it and tried. And I do recommend planting densely because you can always cut that thing out if you can afford at the time to plant that much crops. So by layering on over the years, I've been able to keep weed pressure down. I've been able to increase my nutrient, my organic matter, and make a little tiny forest. And we're just cycling through different perspectives. That's another season of me out there. That's me being excited about how things are looking. And then this is the way it is pretty much like a spring or so ago. Blueberries are looking good, putting up good vigor. I am getting a lot of yellowing right now, and that's due to this being an old, even though I subsoiled, there's a hard pan somewhere at the base of my ground, and that's got so much heavy metals from tobacco farming. And we'll see if I can overcome that with biochar, sugar, and a few other things. So here's a little bit looking at my, well, that might not show up as well on here. Here's where I planted some hemp, and I tilled it up, planted out some wheat, rye, clover, hairy fetch. There's something else in that mix. But you can see where I have some hard compaction layers from where I had to do that. I used a disc to get this out, and my disc wasn't working that well that year. I couldn't afford a better disc. And so we've got, it is what it is. But I got some cover on the ground. Here's it is the next spring. Really nice and healthy. I decided to abandon planting. I was going to plant more hemp this year, in 2020 in this field, but I decided not to. And so I had started mowing it, and then rain came in. I wasn't finishing mowing. And I'm using a flail mower. You'll see a picture of that. That's the best toy to have, is a flail mower, because you mulch up everything. It breaks right back down the ground. You're able to disc that right back in if you want to disc, so you don't have to turn the soil, do anything. And the following year, here we are out there laying some plastic. It was just me and one other guy planting about 2 acres of hemp. And that's pretty much my farm. It's pretty much me and about 6 guys that balloon up to my harvest crew in the summertime. But otherwise, it's just me and maybe one other guy in the winter or spring doing this. So I'm still a plastic culture guy. I'm not gone to the full regenerative, and I don't know if I will anytime soon. I would like to work that way. The next step I would like to get to is cultivating and then throwing out a late season cover crop. But what I did here, came in, disked it, cut flail mowed, disked the whole field, and then came back and tilled each strip. So I still had a little bit of clover, a little bit of rye, still kind of hanging in there. And then we'll get back to that one. Here it is. We're midsummer, about a month, maybe month and a half in, we're starting to see some cover. We're mowed that already once, so we're able to keep, water from eroding away, and we're able to keep the wind off of my hemp plants, which is good for disease pressure, especially once you hit flower. You really don't want to have any dirt running around, which is back to cultivating. If you cultivate too late into the season, you're going to have dirt running around, and that will decrease the value of your hemp crop. I'm growing for flower here and also an oil crop. You can grow this like right out in the field and just let it dust fly around, but to keep a crop, higher quality crop, keep mold down, there's all sorts of disease in the dirt and in the wind. So trying to keep cover out there really does help. And then just as an example of what you can do as as another cash crop on top of your cash crop is to grow herbs. So I'm getting a double use out of my plastic. So here's an example. Let's see if we can get back to this little video. So we're not going to have any noise, which is good. But this is me out here showing my basil that I'm growing. So I'm selling about 400, 300 pounds of basil in the summer to a couple of pizza shops in Asheville. And that gives me an income of about, I'm selling it cheap too. I'm selling it for $9 a pound. So I'm making about $3,600 off of a row crop, off of a crop next to my cash crop. So that covers all my plastic costs. And now I have no input cost. And if my hemp crop, for some reason, which often it does, I don't have to worry about paying my expenses. So now my hemp, if I have to sell that for $50 a pound because that's what the market decides it's worth today, then I'm okay with that. I would rather make $300 a pound, but now I've hedged my bet. So I recommend doing that as much as possible. Find little avenues of how can you add something to what you're already doing. It wasn't any extra work to plant the basil crop, and I had a demand for the market. I've got about 15 more minutes, I think. So here, by the way, and Mike, I've been wanting to tell you about this. I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm going to slaughter this name, a pickle. They're out of Oregon, and they have some of the best soil analysis and leaf analysis tests. Let's see if we got the soil one on here. I think I just have my leaves. I think I deleted my soil. I did. But I edited this last night. But the soil test, what I wanted to show you guys, the soil test showed that I already had active nitrogen in the ground from the cover crop that I had used. Now that cover crop had been in the ground for 2 years. I didn't plant and I didn't incorporate that in 2020. I just left that middle chunk of that field that you saw roll over until last spring in 2020 when I mowed it down again and did all that work. But I had enough nitrogen, initial charge of nitrogen in the ground to give everything it needed to boost. I didn't have to do any chicken, any other nitrogen source. I didn't have to do Chilean nitrate, nothing. I did do 2 rows of chicken on the right side just because I was like, this guy's lying to me. I definitely need fertility. What am I doing? And come to find out, they got bigger plants over there, but they didn't finish as well. They had disease issues. Not a lot. I had a good spray program that year. But I was shocked. I didn't think, because the year before I didn't do cover crop and I didn't add fertility to one of the blocks that I did with hemp, and it was horrible. So cover crop definitely gives you the charge that you need to get your summer kicked off. Now, throughout the year, I did drive my crop. So we can look a little bit at driving what that is. If I'm walking too close, let me know. What I care about these days is sugar, is driving your sugar content and your sap content in your plant. You really can't see that probably in the back, but your sugar, if anybody wants a copy of this, I'm happy to give it to you. Yeah, the sugar's right there, your sap analysis. So it was pretty low initially in the summer, and that's July. Let's go back one more. And yeah, it was like 0.6. So at that point, I have good nitrogen levels. Here's my nitrogen. Here's the beginning of my initial, this is the old and the new, I think is what it is. It could be the other way around. Yeah, this is the new and this is the old. So the old is where your plant, your first leaf is at, and this is the newest tip leaf of your plant. This can apply to everything: corn, soybeans, tobacco, strawberries, blueberries, the whole enchilada. They can do an early leaf and late leaf, so you know where your plant's been and where it's going, so in the season you can correct with foliar sprays. And I'm also seeing what's causing things to not be pulled up through the plant. Chlorine levels are extremely high. I've got magnesium levels are really high, and that was blocking out some growth of my plant. So throughout the year, every week I was taking a test. So here's in July, my chlorine levels are still high, but they drop back down. So I was using a biochar sugar amendment from a fellow out of Asheville called Blue Eden Gold, and those guys are all about regenerative agriculture. They don't believe in any tillage. They hate manure, which is interesting. They think it drives salt content, and they've shown amazing results in wheat and blueberries. And here I am, I'm actually got my magnesium levels under control a little bit, and my chlorine levels. I'm losing my nitrogen like hotcakes right now, but at this point I'm almost about to enter flower, so I don't really care. And then for some reason it spikes back up, my chlorine levels. My magnesium levels are still down. This is still my old test. This is still the bottom life plant, beginning of the season leaf analysis. And I'm seeing some other things happen. But this is a good snapshot, especially for soil tests. You can get the first 2 inches of your soil test, and then you can see where your plant's going at the end of the year, where it's 6 inches or 8 inches down, and where the soil and your nutritional value is there. The test is more than the co-op. It's $65 for a test. But for $65, if you knew where you need to be and where you're going, it's worth every dollar. And here I am out in the, I'm converting over a cornfield. Mike, you might remember this one. This is the one that Ronnie was running, and we had all that runoff and whatnot on. And so here I am flail mowing down a wheat crop that I planted in 2019. I finally got to it this year. So it's covered in weeds. So we'll see if this is a weed heaven this year or if it's not. Oops, went down too far. Well, I might be done. And I did only press it once. But I am trying this year no-till drilling. I didn't no-till out the hemp crop where the hemp was at. We had to get the plastic out of the field, and that would work. And then, so I am tilling out here. We already disked it twice to get it nice and level, and then I'm drilling with a co-op drill. This is red turkey wheat. And then we had back here on this other field, I'm drilling in some rye. It's some heirloom rye that's off the coast of Carolina. It's going to get 9 feet tall. We'll see if we'll be able to combine that with an old school combine. And but the advantage of using heirloom wheats over a modern wheat, something Lindsay wanted me to remind you and to emphasize, is that old wheat the roots have the potential to get as deep as the height of the wheat. So if we're working with a Japanese style modern hybrid wheat, you're only maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall tops. So your roots are also going to be only that far, if most likely only 6 inches deep. So by running old school wheat, not only is our nutritional value in the grain higher, but we're leaving those roots when we cut that wheat down the next year. So now we're able to sequester and leave in the ground a lot more carbon than we originally could. Now the yields are not going to be near as good as your modern wheats. But so my approach to being able to make this economical and viable is, one, Lindsay can grind this directly and we could sell direct to market with the wheat, not only the wheat but the flour. And I'm doing other things on my farm to be able to, I ran the math on this, it was really cheap. It's like $600, $400 to the acre. And if we mill it into flour, we're lucky if we can double or triple that. So, and I really don't want to grow 100 acres of wheat like the Ricker brothers do, but I do want to grow 5 to 10 acres and see if we can bring back a little bit of heirloom wheats. What were the other major benefits of wheat? Your gluten content is lower. You're appealing to a market that might be able to come back to eating wheat if they're gluten sensitive. And so, and this other one, and the other reason why I'm wanting to do wheat is I think I can start to really truly incorporate some of the regenerative ag principles of no-till. I think we can start running right after this wheat crop is out of the ground. I can come back in, probably drill right in the ground some buckwheat, grow buckwheat out for a while, grow that for cover crop seed, make that a cash crop on that land as well, and then turn right back around and maybe plant a legume for a late summer, flail that down, and then come back and plant wheat. I don't know. These are just some ideas I'm trying. We'll see how well I go after it. But that's a little bit of my story. Hope I didn't ramble on about everything too much. Any questions?
This wheat that you're planting, that's
Oh, we got a mic coming to you, so
Here, I got one
the
right
folks
here.
in the back can hear you.
We want to be able to capture this, so.
Yes. This wheat that you're planting, this is breaking up probably your hard pan also.
Yeah.
And so there's great advantage whether you sell it as a cash crop or whether you get long-term advantage by breaking that hard pan.
Yeah.
It seems to be, with the clay soils that we have around here, seems to be an endemic problem to have, tremendous hard pan issues.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that. That's it. The other quick thing that we're doing is we are planting about 5 different kinds of grain out here to see which ones grow the best in the South. Last year we grew red turkey, and actually it turned out to be a viable milling for flour crop. So we're trying to see, because we're used to grow all sorts of it, so we're trying to see which ones are growing best.
When you were talking about your cover crop providing adequate nitrogen, were you talking about your blueberries or your annual crops?
That was for the hemp crop. So that particular block that I showed you where all the green wheat was at, that field that had all the nitrogen it needed to take off. With the blueberries, I've not been doing a clover bed, and they do need a good hit of preferably chicken, not usually manure. Manure brings too much salt for blueberries, and that hurts the acidity and the cation, really, the action it takes for it to convert food over. The only thing I haven't done with that is running the straw and the mulch is just increasing my organic matter, which blueberries like.
How much nitrogen are you adding per year?
For blueberries, I'm due about a half ton, about 1,000 pounds per acre. So about that much. The boys in Eastern Carolina that grow on peat bogs, which is the perfect place to grow a blueberry, I learned this year, they only use $500 worth of fertility a year. They're way more competitive than we are.
On your blueberries, you mentioned using burlap bags.
Mm-hmm.
What about cardboard?
Cardboard can work, yeah.
Does it work?
It will just blow away. You got to get right after
I
it
mean,
and put in.
if you cover the cardboard with mulch,
Yeah.
and then you're
Cardboard, the one thing with cardboard is you would, I'd be worried about where you're getting the cardboard, what glues are in it. But other than that, that's the only concern I would have with that. And it'll deteriorate a touch faster than burlap. Burlap will last about a season, full season.
While he's getting that, I've got a question. I may have missed this when I had to step out, but on your blueberries, that's pretty labor intensive for picking, right?
Yeah.
So how do you go about picking your crop?
I'm really lucky, and they know this, but my old man crew are reliable. There's about 4 of them, 3 of them now actually. One of them's gotten a bump. Anyway, and they just come out every day in the morning, and they'll pick for about 3 to 4 hours, and then they're done. And then I rely on college students to come in and pick up the slack.
Do you allow customers just outside to come in and pick and you sell to them, or?
I might, once the new acre really kicks off, I will. But I've been just selling direct to market the last 6 seasons. And if you live in South Greene, you're just grandfathered in. You're allowed to come out only for South Greene people. You can come by and pick a $12 gallon of berries.
Hi. We moved here about 1.5 years ago, and yes, we are one of those New York people.
Welcome.
But we like to tell ourselves that we're basically Canadians because we were on Lake Champlain, actually neighbor to Essex.
Yeah.
So very close to that, to the south. But anyhow, what we're trying to ask is we only have 4 acres, and we're just going to say as far as workable acres, we're going to say 3 because we're trying to keep the acre that our house is on just for our own personal use. So our understanding is there were just 2 horses on our property for the last 5 years, pretty much kind of feral. So when it comes to the certification process and stating that you need an affidavit, does that just mean you have to contact the prior owner and them just tell you? I mean, she wasn't the most cooperative person, so I'm not really sure that she would do that, but can you
Yep,
just...
you will need an affidavit, a signed affidavit from the previous landowner if you've only owned the property for 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And it's simple. You can just print off a form, have it already filled out for her. All she has to do is sign it and agree to it.
Can it be a neighboring property farmer?
If he was the manager of it, yep. If he's the one that hated or
He
did
pretty
anything.
much kind of oversaw feeding
That'll
the
work.
horses, and he said that he seeded it a couple of times with oats. But
Yeah.
we also did learn, because there were a lot of documents in the old house that we weren't able to save, unfortunately. But we were also told that it used to be a tobacco farm many, many
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah,
So that
most
was
of our land
interesting
is.
hearing you talk about your, problems with that.
Yeah, and those are just I think those all can be remediated with biochar. The guy, and I think we can make it ourselves as well, but biochar is just taking wood and turning it into charcoal, and there's multiple ways to do that. And adding that out to the ground, that's pulling in, and also just planting hemp. I bet if I had planted hemp It wasn't legal when I planted that crop on my blueberries. I think that would have driven a deeper root back to that hard pan, because I didn't put in the slide, but some of my hemp roots are, I mean, they were almost 2 feet down and like heavy. And that was the other beauty of the charge of what I had on that field this year, is without doing any extra inputs. Well, I did drive some food out there. I drove a lot of sugar, but it had really big roots, and that is a remediating, a bioaccumulator crop. So you could run a seed or a fiber crop out there, and then even just mow it down. You would add a lot of biomass back to your ground, growing hemp, that is, just for the bio. I mean, you could get the seeds for 10 cents, not really, really cheap, and just drill it out there, let it grow up, get knee-high before it flowers, mow it down.
Okay,
And you'd bring a lot of carbon and bio.
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions for Dwayne? Going once, twice?
One other quick thing
Go
for the beef guys in the room. There is two, and they're far away, they're in Kentucky, but there is 2 certified organic beef processors up there. So if you guys became beef processors, I'm sure Publix, by the way, is actively looking for local farmers. They hired a boy on the Nolichucky River to grow 100 acres of tomatoes for them. So our local grocers are actively looking to buy our produce. So if you're certified organic, you might be able to get a door in there. And there's processors around us, not in Tennessee, but in Kentucky. Sorry.
All right, Dwayne, thank you very much. Great presentation. Let's give him a hand.